Hi, I'm Laura.
Hi, I'm Deanne.
And I'm Philippe.
And welcome to our Lymond Book Club. We are reading The Ringed Castle by Dorothy Dunnett. And today we're going to talk about part 3, chapters 8 and 9. Dee and Philippe, I couldn't wait to finally get to these chapters and hear your reactions.
I really liked chapter 9. I'm reading it and going, oh, wait, is it gonna happen? Is it gonna happen? Like, you get to the end of chapter 9, it's like, yes!
There's the L language and the punnery and sort of the little mini play they put on, I thought was really cute and fun. And also I recognized the last line of it because it's one of the Tumblr names that you keep showing us art from, the language locked in L, which I just never understood that was a reference to actual Lymond Chronicles until this point. So
yeah, I was like, is that going to be a spoiler for them? But I figured it's vague enough that you wouldn't know.
You would have never known beforehand. So
yeah. So I feel like this entire book is like this bleak slog through this miserable depression wasteland, and then you get to this scene and the sun comes out and it's so funny and Lymond is laughing his ass off and you're like, oh my god, there he is, he's still in there.
Yeah,
he's back.
And Philippa, matches and exceeds him in every way, and she's so funny and brilliant, and they're just such a perfect match. And I just love how she's like the only person in the world now that Sibylla is kind of not around. She's the only person that can tell Lymond what to do and he'll do it. She just bosses him around and he's like, okay.
Yeah, I like her.
Every freaking line of dialogue is gold. I'm sure we'll spend time on it and celebrate it. And I'm sure you guys can imagine this is like the most fan popular thing probably in the whole series.
Imagine. Yeah.
There was a comment in one of the videos about things that were coming, and Laura, I think you were like, the only hint you gave about it was the letter L, and as soon as like the L's, the lust and love and larceny, all of those L's showed up in this play, I was like, oh, I think this is that moment that she was alluding to. And yes, it was. So
I also really liked, and I'm sure like we're totally just gonna talk about chapter 9, skip chapter 8, whatever. I loved how it started out with like this bit of ominous foreshadowing where he had this bit about the going on the trip and how like it was, this destiny or something. I'm like, oh no, something terrible is gonna happen. And then it didn't. So that was nice.
I mean, Lymond might think it's terrible, but we'll have to talk about that.
I don't think it's terrible.
I mean, it's definitely going to change the trajectory of his life if what happened, or if what I think happened indeed did happen. So
what do you mean you think happened?
What do you think happened? I know what I think happened.
I think Lymond's finally opened up his eyes and realized that he has feelings for another human being.
Yeah, he totally felt like,
I mean, it's not very subtle.
Something like, well, head over heel. Like, he totally fell head over heels for Philippa. Just like, and yeah. Something over, there's a phrase like, something over tea kettle, but I don't remember what it is. So he just tumbled.
Yeah, I think one thing that's interesting is like the way that it creeps up on him. And so it's like, I'm not sure he fell in that moment or if it's like he'd been falling.
Yeah.
And suddenly it all came together and his like conscious mind recognized what his unconscious had already been doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was that page where it's like memory, and then yeah. That's cool.
Yep.
We should do chapter 8 though.
Okay, let's do chapter 8. We'll go quickly through chapter 8 because everyone is just gonna skip ahead for us to talk about chapter 9 anyway.
We should put like a timestamp. We start chapter 9 at.
Okay, so chapter 8, I'll quickly summarize. We start out with Osip Nepeja, whose name I'm sure I'm saying wrong, who is the first Russian ambassador to England, having his audience with Queen Mary and Philip. Notably, they're both ill. We can remember, we know our history. She's gonna die soon. I don't know about him. And the big thing that happens in this section actually is that Lymond and Margaret Lennox have their talk. She wants her Scottish inheritance restored. I guess it's her father, Angus, who was in the first book, has died. Philippa has helped with the manipulations to keep Margaret Lennox from getting the Scottish inheritance, which of course she shouldn't get because she betrayed Scotland for England. And she also wants her son Darnley on the throne, married to Mary, Queen of Scots. And she threatens to basically have Kate and Philippa killed because if she can get them accused of treason, they'll be executed. And Lymond just turns her down cold and is just like, I don't care. I'm not that same boy I used to be. You know, you can't manipulate me anymore, kind of thing. And he completely acts like he doesn't care about Philippa or Kate. And he also then brings upon his own the child Kuzum and says, you know, basically, I know you're going to threaten him, so like I'm telling you now, he's not mine. I killed my own son. That's Gabriel and Jolita's son. I don't care what you do to him. Thoughts on this?
So the whole bit, I think I only made a couple of notes in this beginning part, where it's talking about like the company and it's Danny's perspective, right? Yeah. But I thought it was interesting that it mentioned that the Muscovy company, whose members compromised half the government. So it just gave us this sense of how incredibly influential this group is. And I knew it was before, but I guess I just didn't quite realize how many like, very powerful people are part of this company and why it's so essential that it succeeds and that they would put so much might of the English government behind the success of this company. So that was probably information I should have already had, but I didn't. And then it was just kind of like, okay, until we get to the Margaret Lennox and Lymond discussion. So.
It's interesting, like right before that, there's this silent exchange between Lymond and Philippa, where it's Danny's watching and he says Majnun and Layli looking at them. So he's like, I don't know exactly what's going on here. They're having this like subtle communication between each other and Danny's noticing it. But it is just interesting. Like if we talk about this has been building up, just the fact that they're having this like communication through glances and stuff like that.
What is that? Because I wrote a question mark off to the side.
Oh, it's the mythological like Eastern Romeo and Juliet kind of that was referenced before in relation to Lymond and Guzel and their fancy.
Oh. Okay, I remember that. I thought it was also interesting that we get this physical description of Philippa, that her dress was modest, her unchildlike face shadowed by. So it's like we're getting this, yeah, she's not a kid anymore. It's just kind of this reaffirmation of that. Yeah.
Unchildlike, but she has a pure cheek.
Yes. And apparently a lot of money, because there's like a gemmed tassel worth a small fortune.
Yes.
So.
Well, she got all of those inheritances coming her way.
So many inheritances.
Because all of Lymond's money right now is from Russia. It's not the Dame de Dutance's money went to Philippa, and the Madame Donati's money also went to Philippa. So, and Gautier's, I think, although Gautier's was probably tied up with the Dame de Dutance.
Yeah, I would assume, yeah. I think there's interesting sort of gender powered stuff happening with Margaret Lennox, and the way Dunnett describes her. She's described as like powerful, and then we have this moment where like Philippa's not childlike anymore, but she's still youthful, and then we have Lymond insulting Margaret by calling her old on 491. Which I always disapprove of, insulting women for being old. But of course he's doing it just because he knows that it's a way to hurt her and he wants to hurt her in any way he can. And it's hard to blame him for that considering she's her. But I would prefer men didn't or anyone didn't insult women for being old, because it happens and it's not a bad thing.
Yes. But I sort of don't blame him for this one because of how she treated him when he was a kid. Like,
oh, no.
You know, because she is so much older than him, and the way that she most likely abused him when he was 16, it's like, I'm fine with him drawing attention to her age because of that.
That's true. That's actually a really good point. Like, the drawing attention to her age is specifically drawing attention to the fact that she took advantage of her age to hurt him when he was young. And I love how he actually flat out says to her, I am not 16. I am the Voivoda Bolshoya of Russia.
Yeah. And I also love the fact, I wrote off to the side that he challenges her with that I'm not 16 thing, where he says, did it not occur to you that your convictions about my nature, my habits might now be a trifle outdated? And the reality is that they're not. Like, she has actually read him correctly, but that he is skilled enough in this conversation to not give away the fact that, yes, she is threatening something that he would like to protect, or people he would like to protect. But he's just gotten better at deception and manipulation and all that.
Yeah, and she can't read him anymore. And she's so, like, shocked that he turned her down.
Mm-hmm.
She clasped her two hands hard together, unable to believe as yet that he had refused her.
This is a woman who is not used to not getting everything she wants in these situations.
Yeah. I also kind of love the fact that he kind of threw his sex life with Gazelle in her face, which is just like, I love this, like, what she is not, despite all you have said, is frustrated. And you're just like, oh Lord. But I mean, it was a barb that hit, you know?
Exactly. He knows how to hurt her. He knows, even though she wants him dead, she's also just, like, mad with lust about him, and just, you know, all of her hatred and wanting to hurt him comes from the fact that she can't have him.
Yes.
So the big reveal here, he says he killed his son. Do we think he's telling her the truth? Because he obviously has a motivation to lie to her, to protect the child if the child was his. But on the other hand, I don't know, what do we think?
I think he's telling the truth. I mean, we decided that ages ago, that that's what happened. I think he's telling the truth, but I also think the reason he does it is not necessarily that he thinks she's going to believe him, because she may very well assume that he's just lying to protect the boy, but it throws confusion into the whole situation. It's just another, like, why not? You know, but I do think he's telling the truth. Yeah. Also, I think, like, I can't imagine how much it cost him to just say that casually, because he hasn't said that. And to not only just flat out say, I killed my son, but to say it to her, you know, just
But I think it would almost be easier to say it to somebody that you absolutely don't care a whit about than that's to somebody that's on your side, because that's admitting all of this deep gulf of pain that you've been holding on to. Whereas when you say it to this person who just doesn't matter anymore, it's like,
yeah,
you can know this, who cares?
Yeah, maybe it's a way of acknowledging it in oddly enough a low stakes environment. Like, it doesn't matter if she believes him or not in some ways.
Yeah, it's interesting because he alluded to it with Richard, but he couldn't come out and say it, even though at least I felt in that scene like he really desperately wanted to talk to his brother about it, but he just couldn't. And who knows how Richard would have reacted. But yeah, because he can't say it to people that matter, he says it to her. But also, this is actually a pretty high risk thing to do for this kid, because if Margaret Lennox ever wants to hurt this child, ever has any reason to, she has this, you know, you're this incest bastard to like hang over this poor child now.
Yeah, but in some ways, it's not that dangerous because that's a bonkers thing to accuse. Like, the kid is publicly acknowledged as Lymond's, and that's a batshit accusation for especially a woman. Like, no matter how much power she has, that's really crazy. So, I mean, I guess she could kind of get a whisper campaign going that might follow him around,
But I think Lymond knows well enough, and this is why he's so okay saying this, that once he says this to Margaret Lennox, if she believes him, this child has absolutely no worth to her anymore. She can't use this child to hurt Lymond. And what other reason would she have to use that information against? The child is meaningless to her now.
yeah.
Like, all she sort of cares about in any relationship that involves Lymond is how she can use this information to her advantage and to hurt him. And he's basically, by admitting this, saying, you can't hurt me with this at all. You can't hurt me at all anymore, in fact, which is probably not true, but.
Yeah, but if you look at the balance, it makes sense. Like, there's some potential risk to the child's reputation, but the greater good is protecting the child from her trying to use him against Lymond.
Yeah, and if she like, if it works and if she believes him, then that's a huge payoff.
Mm-hmm.
She won't mess with this kid. And it also actually, in some ways, makes Philippa and Kate a little safer too, if she believes this, because they're not harboring Lymond's son. They're not bringing up this boy that means a lot to him. They're bringing up this random kid that he doesn't really care about. So it just kind of, I think it does really cement what he's trying to get her to believe, which is that he doesn't care about Philippa and Kate.
Exactly. And then, of course, we see shortly afterward that he totally does care, and he writes to Richard and is arranging to help Philippa. So, yeah. All right.
I'm trying to find the line, but I think I'm surprised he's not more worried, or he does a very good job of covering it up when she mentions Leonard Bailey and like the information that he has about Sibylla. And I'm looking for the line right now. I think it's on 491, maybe.
Does he know? I forget.
Well, she had the Philippa followed, or the Lennoxes found Philippa at Leonard Bailey. So I think she kind of has an idea what that's all about.
But I forget, like, isn't the last info he got the letter that says the info from Sibylla's sister? So, like, you are not Sibylla's child. You're Gavin's child with someone in France, right? Isn't that the last he got? But, like, meanwhile, Philippa talked to Leonard Bailey and found out more like, actually, you were born in France and you probably are Sibylla's. But I don't think Lymond knows that. I honestly can't keep track of what we're supposed to know when.
I think you're right.
So the line's on the bottom of 491. But if you leave, Margaret said, your divorce cannot go through. And what will the child's lovers do then? Repeat the sad history which Mr. Bailey tells of your mother? So she obviously knows that Mr. Bailey has some sort of information, which I think means that she has really sort of researched that after catching Philippa up at Bailey's castle.
For sure. This is another weapon she can use against Lymond. All right. Shall we move on to the next section? Okay. The next section is super boring. These are the negotiations, pages with the sort of more above ground, and then Lymond's more below ground, secretive. Lymond trying to get the weapons for Russia.
I thought the little, like, the bit with the, the bit with the bribing with the book kind of thing. Like, I mean, that was kind of, it was interesting to see the way that they're like, we want to fulfill this request, but we don't want to do it publicly, and we certainly don't want Philip to find out about it. So we're going to do this backhanded way of doing it with this guy whose house we just happen to be in because he's like an arms dealer. So he's going to get all this stuff. And it was just it was kind of interesting to see all that behind the scenes sort of wink, wink, nudge, nudge, like we're going to do it this way, but we're going to say we're doing it that way kind of thing. I was curious that I think the thing about this that it's not on this section, but later when this all comes together and Lymond is super suspicious about how fast and easy it came together, that my interest is piqued. I'm like, what's going on there? So.
Yeah, he was not expecting this deal to happen at all.
Right, something's fishy. So, but I don't understand enough about international trade in the 1500s to know what the fishy thing is.
Well, and when Lymond reveals it's fishy, it's sort of preluded right before that is the concern about Courtney's letters, because they can agree to whatever they want if they think Lymond's going to get like arrested for treason and taken away anyway, and they don't have to follow through.
Oh, that's interesting.
So I think that makes him suspicious. But yeah, that does happen later. This is like sort of the initial negotiations. I
did have a question on 504. So, okay, the top of 504, the guys, I did not bother to keep track of who they were. Petra and Thirlby or whatever. Anyway, they tell Lymond, your own country of Scotland then holds no attraction for you. I thought perhaps you were bent on repeating the great alliance between Scotland and Russia and Denmark, which was to result in the crushing of Sweden. And then Lymond did not smile in return, nor turn the matter. He says, I've had offers from that quarter, certainly, but so far I have not been tempted. Okay, so then he leaves, or they leave, and then one of them looks at the other and says, my God. And then the bishop replies, yes, it was a threat to make all other threats pale in insignificance. The question is, how far does he mean it? Okay, so was the threat that he was going to, he said, but so far I've not been tempted, is that the threat that they're freaking out about? That he hasn't been tempted to ally Scotland with Russia and Denmark?
I guess the threat would be to ally Russia with Scotland and use that to fight England. I mean, I don't think it's about Sweden, right?
First of all, why do they care about Sweden? And
too much about Sweden.
Russia and Scotland allied against England, but it's like they're like, oh my God, that was saying like they're kind of freaking out about this, and I was like, what? So.
Well, there's also a lot of talk in this chapter, which I didn't really understand because it's the political situation of the 1550s at the time, about how Lymond, when he goes back to Russia, would get a promise from the Tsar not to attack. Is it Lithuania and Latvia and Estonia, or whatever countries are sort of in there between Scandinavia and Russia? And I felt maybe that had something to do with the threat, like Lymond saying, well, I won't get those promises if this deal doesn't go through. This whole section was not, I didn't glean a lot from it.
I think if you're really interested in the European international political history, I'm sure that this is really interesting, and I'm sure that her information is super accurate and relevant to the time. But I'd rather talk about the language locked in L part. So,
like, we gotta talk about this Danny section coming up next, because I thought this was good and super interesting, because I have definitely moved into the Danny's okay, and I'm super suspicious of de Harcourt again. And I think actually our de Harcourt suspicions are confirmed in the next chapter. But
let me just finish this section. I had a couple comments on it real quick, and then I'll summarize the next one and we can dive in.
Sure.
I did want to, I guess, mention, I thought it was entertaining how the one dude is like so distracted by the food, because I get it. We also get the first mention of the book, the Cicero's De Republica, and I want to just let's just keep our eye on that, because once we get to the conclusion, I want to talk about the symbolism of it.
Okay.
The bribe, right? So it's like he gave him the book, and then he can sell it, and then Henry Sidney buys it back for Lymond.
Right, so it's a bribe, but then Henry Sidney gives it back kind of as a thank you for trying to save Chancellor. But also, I think the topic of the book itself is interesting. I mean, we can just look at it now. It's a book about Roman politics, and sort of about the sort of different types of constitutions and the roles played by citizens in government. So, why this book I think is interesting in relation to Lymond's nation building ambitions in Russia. Does it symbolize his Russian dreams? Does it symbolize his return to more Western and European kinds of approaches? What does it mean that he gives it away and he's sad and then he gets it back? I don't know if you have any thoughts.
No.
No.
I mean, I definitely was paying attention to the fact that this book was being passed around, but I didn't know if it served. I mean, obviously it serves some sort of greater purpose, but I don't know what.
I don't know. It's really hard for me to focus on what Lymond's political strategy is at this point, because I'm he's falling in love with Philippa. So it's kind of yeah, whatever. But yeah, he has ideas about what good governance should be, and he seems to be more willing to make a direct impact in that now than he was when he was younger, maybe.
Yeah, and I guess I would say if we think about who Lymond is as a person and what he wants to do with his life, over and over we have this idea that he wants to make a positive difference in the world, and he's frustrated by the fact that he, because he doesn't have a hereditary position to have influence, he has to sort of sell his loyalties and can't stay true to his ethics about actually wanting to make the world better. And so I feel like the book is actually a representation of those sort of ethical ambitions to change the world for the better, which really is very core to his personality. And it's very telling that he's willing to give it up, even though he's sad about it, just as we kind of see him selling his soul in Russia, to Ivan and Guzel. And then the fact that there's this moment of grace where Henry Sidney gives it back to him is kind of this idea of, hey, you may have made some mistakes, but your life isn't over. You don't have to sell out the stream.
I also really like that Henry Sidney gives it back to him as a direct result of his almost willingness to sacrifice himself in a futile attempt to save someone, which I feel is very Lymond.
Well, it's the fact that he didn't succeed, but what matters is that he tried.
Yeah, and that there's value in the attempt.
Yeah, I think it's really lovely. It's very, very, very subtle. I feel like she gets too subtle in this book sometimes, but it's lovely. Okay, one other bit in the section I did think was also maybe her sort of winking at the future, where it's on 503, where Lymond says basically if they keep Muscovy in the backwater where she has fallen, it will not serve your immediate ends, and it may bring about an explosion out of her ignorance and poverty and resentment, which your descendants will have cause to regret. And then they don't care about their descendants. But I did think that was very telling, just sort of her comment on the future. I don't know exactly what happened after this, but I'm sure
the descendants certainly had cause to regret.
Yeah.
What eventually happens in Russia, so.
Yep. Okay, let's move on to the Danny bit. So really quick, Lymond and Danny catch up about the Vans affair. I don't know if you pronounce the S, but whatever. It's the return of Courtney's papers to England, and the fact that Danny's trying to find them because they implicate not only Lymond but also Philippa. And Danny realizes that Lymond wrote to Richard to enlist the Dowager Queen's help in protecting Kate and Philippa. That's a summary, but let's talk about the fun. Dive in.
Just the very first line. Come in and shut the door and stop being vivacious. I love it. It's so fun.
Yeah.
And I feel like their relationship is sort of not cracking, but the ice that was built upon it in Russia is now cracking. And like in this whole section, we see Danny sort of trying to warm Lymond up, like by the fact that Lymond is still calling everybody by their last name. But Danny's like, Blacklock, Adam is drawing maps.
Yeah.
Harcourt, Ludo. And then that thing where like he was hoping he would be called Hislop Danny.
Yeah.
Like he's really trying to like break him out of this shell that he's been in. And I love that about Danny. I really do.
I also get the sense like this is really the thing that made me feel like, okay, it moves my suspicions of Danny much, much lower. Just the fact that he's in this sort of secret plan with Lymond, and unless it's somehow like 3D chess where Lymond's tricking him into doing something that I don't know, but it seems like this is something that Lymond would really want a trustworthy person to do, because capturing these letters is important and they really do need to get them, and it's Kate and Philippa that are in danger. So I don't think that Lymond would trust someone that he didn't. If Danny wasn't trustworthy, I don't think this would be happening. So that's kind of that. I completely agree with you, Philippe, about this. Like, I loved his line about, he's just funny. I simply love having secrets from Adam and Ludo, but I am risking my fair neck in the cause. You know, just Danny being vivacious, if you will.
What is your principal characteristic, would you say? Treacherousness, said Danny gloriously.
Yeah, right.
That is everyone's principal characteristic.
And Lymond, despite himself, is bantering with him. Also, there's a line above where Danny says, why don't we like the Lennoxes? And Lymond says, because they talk too much.
Yeah.
Well, we also, I think you hit the nail on the head here, Dee, about Lymond trusting Danny. If Lymond is pretty sure he knows who tried to kill him in Russia, like he tells Henry Sidney in the next chapter, then he wouldn't be having these secret conversations with Danny if he thought it was Danny. So I think you're right. That does sort of eliminate him as the suspect. I'm not still 100% sure. I'm still a little suspicious, but like.
Well, I'm not sure I'm 100% sure about anybody ever.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, but I feel like Danny has gone back to like, I'm regularly suspicious of him as opposed to extra suspicious of him. So.
I also love how he asks Lymond, like, hey, once you get that divorce, do you mind if I court Philippa? And it's like, another one? Great.
Yeah, and Lymond's just like, well, line up to fight. And also, I like this too at the on 506, where so Danny figures out that Lymond had to write Richard to talk to the Dowager Queen, and of course, the last he knew, Richard like beat him up. So he says, Danny Hislop, in whose being a mad curiosity flourished at the expense of his undoubted acumen, said simply, Christ, what did you say? And I just love that, like, even though Danny probably knows that Lymond's not going to respond well to that comment, he just can't help himself from like, what the hell? So.
But we see how Danny can put two and two together. He's got a sharp mind and he uses it, and he's figured things out. So I like that.
Words are in. So,
yeah. For sure. And it is like, it's nice to have him kind of working on breaking through Lymond's barriers. And we also have Philippa working on it. So it's kind of like all these things in tandem finally click.
Yep.
Should we move on to the last section? Okay, so back to the negotiations. The English officially refuse to give the arms to Russia, but they actually agree as long as it's done in secret, and Philip can't know because of political reasons that we don't really care about. And we have the Cicero given, and then we have Lymond and Danny again. And this is where we get this reveal that Lymond thinks the English should not have agreed. And so he's worried about the Courtney letters and some kind of ticking time bomb here, because why did they agree?
Yeah, I mean, this line about his face older than his years was not accommodating, and his eyes too brightly colored for a man were perfectly bleak. And so something is definitely wrong. But I don't know what it is.
I did like the little reminder about Pierre Gilles from Pawn, that Lymond got the book from him. I have no idea, though, how in the midst of escaping from Istanbul, in the midst of opium addiction, etc., Lymond somehow managed to buy a copy of this very expensive book. He must have done it through letters after the fact, because he also didn't have any money in Istanbul.
Right, he dumped all of his money into those diamonds for the kid. Yeah, it had to have been like sometime in this, however long he was in Russia, business.
Yeah.
Which again, where are Jarrett and Marta?
Well, we get a mention in the next chapter. Philippe was like, you called Jarrett.
Yeah.
Called him a lot worse than that.
Oh my God, every line in that is so fun. Okay, should we move on to chapter 9?
Please.
Okay, so I'm going to summarize it in batches: before the House of Rebels and then during and after. So we start out with Henry Sidney, he's returning to London and he wants to meet Lymond. Then we cut over to Lymond arranging the ships to transport the arms back to Russia. He meets up with Chancellor's successor, Jenkinson, and then with Nicholas, Chancellor's younger son, and then Philippa and Henry Sidney. So kind of a lot of emotions about Chancellor happening here. And then we cut into this like super weird, hilarious scene where we're sort of introduced to Henry Sidney searching the floor for the glass eye of a mechanical owl that has been created by John Dee. And then like the mechanical owl is stomping around with like its laser eyes and then like falling apart and its eye falls out again. Like the whole thing is so weird. And we're getting this whole tonal shift. And this is all, this was a thing, like building these mechanical, there was a museum exhibition recently about these kind of like mechanical things that were built during the early Renaissance. So
yeah.
This is, you know,
this is too weird to not be true. Like when I was reading this, I was like, this has to be a real thing.
Yeah, and I love this tonal shift because it's like, it's so weird, but then it starts getting us into like this almost like this dream world of falling in love in this magical, sunny, funny place. And sort of builds up to the next kind of big scene, but also it's still true to the book, and we have some up and down. So we have the discussion between Sidney and Lymond about who was paid to kill him, and Lymond says he knows who it was and that he promises justice once he has proof. Sidney returns the Cicero to Lymond as the thank you for trying to save Chancellor. And then Lymond and Philippa banter. She warns him about a plot that could risk the arms deal. And then they head to the office of the rebels in Mass and Blackfriars. So let's talk up to 520, and then we'll then switch to the actual big scene.
Okay. On these first couple of pages, my only comment was I did sort of find it funny that they take the whatever his name is,
Napasia,
on this tour of like sites, and one of the sites that they see is the round table of the Enchanted King Arthur with the names of the 12 knights still written where they used to sit around it, and I'm like, what fake table was this? Because clearly it's obviously not the actual round table, but I'm assuming that they thought it was, like there was some table that had some.
I actually Googled this at some point because I was like, what? And I don't remember if I actually found records of it or not. I'm sure they exist. I'm sure this is a real thing. But like how a tourist attraction a lot of times is like a fake thing, or like a Saint's relic is a fake thing. Like it's totally one of those things.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's like some table, like people just started telling stories a couple hundred years before this about like, it's the table, you know? So then it becomes the lore of the table, but.
And it's like, oh, if you were, you know, touristing in England in the 1550s, you'd go see the Round Table, of course.
I mean, I would. I do love how Philippa kind of saves him from this situation with Nicholas in particular. Like she sends Nicholas away, and it's just a sign that she pays attention to him and knows him, and that he's super uncomfortable with Nicholas and that conversation. And so Philippa is just like, Nicholas, don't you need to go do this thing? And she rescues him.
Yeah, I think it's lovely, and it's so we're kind of told through very subtle hints about how uncomfortable he is and kind of sad, because first he meets Jenkinson, and it just tells us Lymond did not greatly wish to meet Tony Jenkinson, although the younger man's enthusiasm overbore any restraint on his part. So like, this guy's lovely, but it's just painful to meet Chancellor's successor. And Lymond helped get this person in place to help, you know, him be successful, but it's still just painful. And there's also then Lymond left before long, so kind of subtly telling us that he's sad. And then like you said, Philippa picks up on it and sends the child away. And then, but also I love that she kind of very gently corrects Lymond and says, it is really not easy to receive someone's thanks, but you must make the effort.
Right. Yeah. She's great. I love this line where it sort of hit me. I was like, what is going on? Because when Henry Sidney says, I'm delighted to meet you, Aunt Jane, I've dropped the I on your beautiful floor. And that's when that tone shifted into this weird, like, he dropped what?
Yeah, he dropped an I, not the I, an I.
An I, oh yeah.
First time I read this, I was like, are we in a dream? Like, what is going on?
So weird. And then she's like, then pick it up. I will not have my maids tormented by your wandering eyes. I'm like, what is going on?
I thought it was metaphorical at first until like the owl automata showed up, and it was like, oh no, I thought he was like just saying he was looking at the floor or something. But
well, she said, Mr. Crawford, will you help him? And then they started like looking for it on the floor. That's when I was like, oh wait, it's a thing. So
yep. And I think again, like Lymond, he can't maintain this distant reserve as the Vovoda Bolshoya when he's like crawling around on the floor looking for an eye.
And to Harcourt's response when he sees, I guess Philippa's standing beside this very large owl, and he just says, my stars. Like, he's so stunned, he doesn't know what to say.
I think Ludo's really cute because he's kind of dumb, but he's like really like kind of sweet, like the way that they're doing the play, and he's like, I can't think of anything, and then Philippa helps him. Like, it's, you know, it's cute.
He's not that bright.
He's not that bright, yeah, but he's kind of sweet. I don't know how this works, but I am so curious how in the 1550s they managed to build this owl so that it gave off intermittent beams of red and mysterious light. Like, is this with mirrors? Is there a candle there?
A candle and mirrors and glass, like red glass, maybe, or yeah, something.
Also, we get a shout out to Philippe O'Liamro. He's still
yes.
I underline that.
Sadly, we don't really hear much about what he's up to, but he's still
do we ever find out what he does? I guess that's a spoiler, don't tell me. But yeah,
he comes back.
I was a little bit sad that we didn't actually learn how he's doing.
Yeah, I guess I think maybe, I don't know, I was sort of Googling it, and it sounds like Henry Sidney was doing creepy colonialist things in Ireland, actually. So maybe we don't want to know how he was interacting with O'Liamro, because I'm sure O'Liamro was trying to protect Ireland. I don't know.
Yeah, the whole English-Irish situation.
Yeah, and Henry said he's such a sympathetic character here, but then I was Googling it, I was like, oh, I don't know about this. Yeah, very different cultural norms and expectations and stuff.
Yeah, not so good.
But yeah, so we get the return of the Cicero and the inscriptions also. I'm curious if you guys had any thoughts on those.
So the first one was from Robert Thorne's letter to King Henry VIII. There is no land uninhabitable or sea unnavigable, which is incredibly apropos for both Lymond and Dickon Chancellor. You know, that seems to really encompass their friendship, that quote. But then the other one was merely a phrase. They made the whole world to hang in the air. That one I didn't have as many ideas about. Like, I don't know.
I think it's just really lovely, evocative, and poetic, although I don't know what it means literally.
Yeah.
But I feel like both of these kind of capture this sense of exploration and adventure in the early Renaissance, when it wasn't about conquering and getting gold. It was about discovering other cultures and more of the world, and sort of more like, it was very magical, you know, magic and science were kind of conflated, and so many mysteries to uncover about what's out there in the world.
Where are the dragons?
So then we start kind of building up to the scene, and we have some great banter with all of them, and just great, weird, funny things. So one of the other things I love about just how surreal this is the fact that Philippa is basically wearing a red sock on her head,
yeah.
Which is like the Spanish fashion of the time. Everything about this is so weird and awesome.
So weird. Or, at one point it is called, he studied the smart little cap below which, so it's got to be some sort of like floppy hat that just looks like a beanie flopped over or something that, I don't know.
I think, I didn't have time to like dig stuff up, but I think there's people that have found like paintings of the time and kind of guessed about like the fashion of what she must have been wearing.
Yeah.
But I mean, honestly, when you look at the paintings of those times, the hats are pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, there's some crazy hats. That is really true. And some crazy hairstyles.
Yeah.
They did some weird stuff with hair. I do love that Philippa says, my head does not require a large hat, and the Somerville cranium brings its own dowry. And I just love that she's like, my brain is my dowry. Like, that's so cool. Yeah.
She has so many good lines in this section.
So many good lines.
Shall I be shocked? Could I be shocked? After Suleiman's harem, I should think it unlikely, Lymond replied.
I love your wedding night, sweet Philippa, is going to be a revelation to someone. And I was just like, whoa, that's kind of a bold statement. And then she's like referencing things she's learned in the harem.
Yes, when I wriggle up from the bottom of the bed.
Right. Do they do that in? And you're just like, okay.
Listening to you.
What are we referencing here, Philippa?
And then we get you called Jarrett, and I love that she's calling him out, just like Danny was earlier on, call people by their first name, stop creating this distance. It's ridiculous.
I love the Slotta Baba line. Do you call her Slotta or Baba? Or was she exempt since you couldn't presume an acquaintance?
Like, she totally reads him just 100%,
And she has no fear, and she's so accurate at just calling out all these things that, like, we've just been watching him languish, and you see now how wrong Guzel was. Like, Guzel was pushing him in this cold direction, turn off your humanity. And then here's Philippa, like, come into the light and be this playful being and connect with others,
Yeah, and I love that he totally acknowledges, like, how effective this is. And he says, like, Philippa Somerville, will you kindly take a new site for your cannon? You see me beaten quite flat to the ground, Celine. And so he's like, okay. Yeah, it's just delightful.
Also, she says, do I frighten you? And he just says, yes.
Yes, that's odd. I don't frighten Austen Gray. Which makes me think Austen Gray's kind of dumb.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's Austen's mistake. Yeah. But Austen does not respect her the way that Lymond does. I will keep arguing this. You know, he tries to tell her what to do. Lymond would, he knows he can't. You know.
Well, also, I would probably guess that Philippa is not actually showing her true self to Austen Gray or to anyone. Like, she's not doing this like slightly sexy biting banter with people, you know.
Oh, for sure, because Austen wouldn't understand it. He wouldn't be able to counter it. Like, if he saw that side of her, like he wouldn't even understand.
Yeah.
Okay, so we move on to the next part. All right.
Is this when they go to Blackfriars?
So it's Henry Sidney, Lymond, Philippa, de Harcourt, and Nicholas Chancellor, which is also just this amazing, like, random group. So they go to this House of Revels in Blackfriars, which was a real place where they stored all the stuff for the Queen's masks and revels. And yeah, we have this foreshadowing of this inevitability and fate, which we'll go back to, I'm sure, and talk more about. Lymond and Philippa first talk privately on the boat about the deal that Lymond made to help Philippa and Kate through Richard to get the Dowager Queen's protection for them. And we also find out, although Philippa doesn't know that it happened or what it means, but we find out that Richard sent back to Lymond that gift that he had sent Richard and Kevin on Kevin's birth, which is really sad. And then Philippa and de Harcourt swap places, and de Harcourt has this conversation saying, you know, we both know the killer could be one of the St. Mary's men. He says that he's had a change of heart about Lymond and he would like to go back with him to Russia, and also encourages him to protect Philippa. Philippa notices after that Lymond's good mood has gone, so she sets out to restore it. She is very successful. She ends up falling off of this crate thing, stands or whatever, and gets knocked out at the end. And as Lymond carries her back to the Sidneys, realizes that he is head over heels in love with her.
The heels. No, that's the wrong musical. Never mind.
What?
I was gonna sing something about like a love song, but I started singing Sound of Music instead. So never mind. Moving on.
Express the joy. It's so nice to have some sunlight and some joy in the midst of this book. So I guess, I don't know, we should just dive in, but let's try and go in order because there's just so many wonderful things to celebrate and linger over in this. I'll just start with just the fact that it's a sunny, sparkling day, because everything has been so cold and so dreary for so long, and it's obviously like the oldest trick in the book, but it's just like, just feel the sun coming out.
Yes.
Well, and it's such a drastic shift change from Russia as well, because we've been in this cold, forbidding, dark land for most of the book. So
it's warm, right? Everything's been so cold and now it's warm.
But then we get this whiplash a little bit just directly after that, where it's the sunny, sparkling day and the company was gay and congenial. Henry Sidney smiled and let affairs take their own course. It was a short journey and more fateful than any one of them knew, a journey inevitable from the day Francis Crawford was born and set firm in his stars where already old eyes had distinguished it and younger eyes, also far-seeing, had chosen to ignore and defy it. And so that was this line. I'm like, oh crap, what horrible bad thing is gonna happen, you know? But no.
So let's talk about whose eyes are whose. Who are the old eyes and who are the younger eyes?
So, well, my question is, what's the it first? So, A journey inevitable from the day Francis Crawford was born and set firm in his stars where already old eyes had distinguished it and younger eyes, also far-seeing, had chosen to ignore and defy it. So what's the it? First of all, is it the journey? Is it the stars?
It's love.
Love?
I think it's the journey, but the journey is set firm in his stars. And what the journey represents, obviously, is, what's the outcome of this journey? He realizes he's in love with Philippa.
Right. So if the being in love with Philippa is the thing that is inevitable from the day he was born, then the question, old eyes had distinguished it and younger eyes also. So I feel like the old eyes are Sibylla's, like that she recognized the potential for Philippa and Lymond from knowing Philippa.
Where do you see that in the text?
I just see it as her knowing Lymond and her knowing Philippa. And I don't remember. I'm sure if I went back and looked at their interactions, maybe there would be something there. But that's just my first instinct, is that it's her.
And then who are the younger eyes?
That's Philippa.
To ignore and defy the journey.
I think she has had feelings for a while, but has been ignoring them. Just the fact that she went out of her way to go to Istanbul to help save the child, and all of the things that she's done for Francis over the years now, even from the very first thing when she rushed in the middle of the night to wherever he was on the whipping post to sort of say what she knew about Jolita at the time.
Yeah, I mean, I've said from the very, very beginning that the thing that intrigued me about Philippa back in, was it Game of Thrones? Yeah, was that her feelings about Lymond were strong. Like, even though at age 10 or whatever they were, they certainly weren't romantic, nor was that appropriate. But she had these very strong reactions to him, even as a child, and was inordinately angry.
But then does that mean she was ignoring and defying it? Because it could be she was actually helping it along without realizing.
Yeah.
It is them falling in love.
Yeah. I don't know. I do think wasn't there a piece of text in Han and Frankincense where the text sort of referenced that she was refusing to see Lymond, look at her feelings for Lymond or see Lymond. I have a vague memory that there's some text about that where she's not going to deal with how she feels about him or something.
True, yeah. I think she's been in denial. There's definitely been hints of that. I would argue that the old eyes are most likely the Dame de Dutance.
Mm.
I didn't even think about that.
And part of it's because she's kind of the one who's been looking at his stars. But also the fact that she sent Philippa to wherever she sent her, anyway, wherever she picked up Kuzum and ended up in the harem. I think you could argue that whole thing that she sent Philippa on that journey was to get Philippa polished up to be Lymond's partner, basically.
That makes sense. I forget about the whole destiny thing with her. Oh yeah, right. She's the magic lady.
Yes.
So would that mean the younger eyes would be Guzelle, because she also sort of has this thing about fate, and she saw it coming and tried to interfere and put herself in the way of things?
I think that's a very strong argument, that Guzelle's sort of zooming in and taking Lymond away to Russia was a attempt to defy fate that was doomed to fail. Right? He was never meant for her. He was meant for Philippa.
But Guzelle also played her part in polishing the gemstone that Philippa becomes. So I don't know about that for sure.
Yeah. Or it could be, she did some of what the Dom wanted her to do, but then she swooped in and defied it. You could also think that the younger eyes are Lymond's, because he's the one who went off to Russia despite like everyone who cares about him being like, no. And he also, there's that moment in Queen's Play where he's like, I'm never going to get married. Love is not for me. So it could be him who's been defying it and putting it off. And then finally it's like, nope, you can't avoid this.
That works for the defiance part, but I don't think it works for the ignore part, because the way I read it, I don't think Lymond realized consciously that he had these feelings. So there was nothing to ignore. Like, I can see if the defying argument was there, but that moment that he's just so taken aback by this sudden like realization that he's like, oh my God, that I don't think he was actively ignoring something. I don't think he knew it was there.
I definitely don't think he consciously knew it, for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
My best guess is the old eyes is Dame de Dutons and young eyes is Guzel, but I think it is ambiguous, and you can argue other things.
I mean, there's an argument to be said, because the whole paragraph is sort of about fate. Both of these women sort of represent fate in different ways, and they both have this sort of like, you know, we're seers of a sort. So.
Okay, so then we have Lymond relaxed a trifle more than was usually possible, which again is just setting us up for this to happen. It's like these walls are coming down, the ring castle, right? He sort of, without realizing it, has reduced his defense mechanisms. And then also I just love Philippa's malign scarlet sock unbent and flew like an ensign in battle as she took her place and settled down on the boat.
Yeah, I love this next bit on 521 where you just see again like Philippa's ability to partner him. In this case, it's politically. So like they have this political discussion that's very much both of them talking through what's going on with Margaret Lennox and her inheritance, and Philippa has insight, and it's just, you just see her, like the impact of her time with Suleiman's court and the impact of her time with Mary's court and all that she's learned and her education that she's pursued aggressively. And
yeah, for sure. Like the only other person we've ever seen be able to hold a conversation with Lymond like this in a sympathetic way was Christian Stewart. Margaret Lennox can hold her own with him, but in an evil way, obviously. And Gabriel could in an evil way. But here's like finally another person on Christian's level and even exceeding Christian's level, because they were both much younger, you know, when Lymond and Christian were interacting. The return of the little black silver rose from Richard. Thoughts?
It's just sad. I feel like Richard has given up yet again. And we're going to have yet another moment in the future where Richard realizes that Lymond is just, you know, trying to protect him from things.
I mean, it does make me like, I'm glad that Lymond was unable to tell Richard about his son, because I feel like of all the people in his life that he cares about, of all of them, Richard is the worst person for him to tell this to. The worst. And so yeah, so even though that scene was terrible and like it was so sad, but oh my gosh, if he had actually confessed that to Richard.
No, talk to Kate, talk to Sibylla. Do not tell Richard. Richard to just assume like you maliciously murdered your child. You know,
Richard would just go. First of all, he would take it 100% the wrong way, and then he would have a horrible reaction to it.
Yeah. So the way also like Lymond writes this cold letter, signs with his surnames, and so like the fact that they're collaborating to help Philippa and Kate, but they're doing it in this we have no relationship way, and that Richard reciprocates the we have no relationship approach. Yeah, it's very sad. And honestly, Richard, you should know better by now.
There's going to be some, or at least there better be some good chapters with both of them in the next book. I don't think it's going to fix itself by the end of this book, so.
No.
But I feel like every time we talk about what we want in the future, we're like, we want a Lymond and Richard reconciliation chapter. And like, it happens, but then they go and again.
Yep.
I am a little annoyed at her at kind of pulling the same trick for the third time. Like, because I stood up and cheered the first 2 times they reconciled, right? That moment in Disorderly Nights when Richard's like, no, we must go after Gabriel now. I was like, yes. And of course the Dell scene is like the greatest thing in the universe. But yeah, it's like the fact that she's doing it again is kind of like, come on.
I mean, it just makes Richard a much less sympathetic character. Like the fact that he keeps doing this over and over, it just, like, it's understandable. He's young originally, kind of, and you can see, like, you know, he misunderstood things, okay, and then kind of did it again, okay. The third time, it's like that fool me once, fool me 3 times. It's like, you gotta.
But to be fair, you yourself were like, I am at my wit's end with Lymond. He needs to get over this.
No, but I don't think that's why Richard. I mean, maybe. That's true. I was pretty mad at Lymond. Still am.
Haven't we all been, though?
But I am not in a position to, like, be like, hey, I'm your brother. Like I am not in a position to actually do anything for Lymond, whereas Richard is. And he's his little brother. Like, I think I can have the same reaction to Richard treating Lymond the way that Lymond's treating his mother.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, I think Richard did try. He does have that moment where he's like, I know that you often do this. Like, if you have a good reason, please tell me. But then he loses patience so fast, and then he hits him so hard. So yeah, I think it's perfectly reasonable to kind of lose patience with Richard as well. Okay, should we jump on to the Harcourt Exchange?
Yeah.
Ooh, what do you guys think?
So I still think it's such a Harcourt.
Yeah, I think he confessed, basically. This is basically him confessing to this. And he did what we thought he did, which was have a change of heart. And yeah.
So the last time anybody tried to kill Lymond that we know of was the Tartar girl in the tent, which Lymond basically was like, Ludo, you take care of this. Which if Lymond knew it was Ludo at that point, which he seems to have done, and we thought he might have known at that point, that makes sense. But then something must have happened to change his heart, because after that, Ludo's always rushing in to try and save Lymond's life. And I'd have to go back and reread to see what may have happened, or it may be something that happened sort of off script. But I think something definitely happened to give Ludo a change of heart.
I mean, I think he's observing Lymond the whole time, but I think it was when he killed Slaughter Baba it's that same time, but the Tartar girl thing was already set up.
Yeah.
When he killed Slaughter Baba
to save the child.
Attempt to save this, like, even if there was a chance to save this child, he tried.
Yeah.
Well,
and then he sacrificed something that was so important to him to do so. That could be it.
And when he talks about it on 523, kind of in the middle, where he says, you cared for that bloody eagle, and yet you killed it for a Tartar baby that turned out to be dead already. And at sea, there is no disguise that will serve a man on the sea. So it was the Slaughter Baba thing, but also, like, remember when Lymond was on the boat and he was just one of the men helping, and working himself to the bone.
It's like the Slaughter Baba thing was the catalyst. And then he just watched Lymond his subsequent behavior. So this, like, so what are you saying? That I want to go back with you to Russia. I shall serve you to the best of my ability. You will be safe from me, and I swear I shall protect you against any man wishing to harm you. And if you fear any danger to that girl, I beg you take her. So I think that's a confession from him where he's saying, now you can trust me to do this. You couldn't like, I was not trustworthy before. I am now trustworthy. Like, I will protect you. I want to serve you to the best of my ability. Not only do I think it's kind of a confession, but I also think that he's authentic. I think this is true. Like, I read this as Ludo having a genuine change of heart, and that he really did. My question still, I think the question that's unanswered is, why was he so against Lymond from the beginning?
Yeah.
Gotta have.
We threw out some pretty good theories. So it's either something to do with Gabriel because Ludo was a night hospitaller, or he was in the employ of Margaret Lennox, or maybe some mixture of both.
I don't think it's Lennox at all. I think it's got something to do with Malta and Gabriel and that whole business.
I mean, it's the more likely option.
Yeah. So we just still don't know what that was. But
yeah, no, I agree with you. That's how I read this too. And like, I think Lymond also, because of the way if he knew it was Ludo this whole time, he also saw this change come about, which is why he hasn't called him out on it yet in any way, shape, or form. Well, he says that he doesn't have proof, but like, Lymond's got to have some sort of plan. If he knows that Ludo was the one that was trying to kill him and hasn't made any action toward it yet, it's because it's serving some sort of purpose. So, yeah.
Well, also at the bottom of the page, we get this. So Lymond is today. You're indicating, okay. So we get this whole like there's somebody else business where Lymond, I think he's joking where he says like, now I come to think of it, Fergie had him. Now and then a very odd look in his eye. I think that's a joke.
Oh yeah.
But he does say, Lymond sat up and added unexpectedly, I know it is easy to mock and not so easy to make a confession of ill will. As it happens, suspicion lies somewhere else with a man who had access to my correspondence. So I do feel like I don't think Lymond is dismissing de Harcourt's confession here, but I do think perhaps there's someone else that we need to be looking for. But I don't think that means that de Harcourt wasn't the person.
Either that or he's just trying to put de Harcourt at ease. Because he's like, no, I know it was you, but I'm going to let you off the hook.
Maybe. But yeah, I definitely think de Harcourt was the person.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that Lymond says, I know who it is, in a way where de Harcourt overhears also.
Yeah.
Like, he does that specifically, I think, so de Harcourt hears it.
Yeah, I think this confession is not a surprise to Lymond.
But I do think it's a debate about whether it's really a confession.
I mean, he's coming at it sideways. But it's, I mean, I wouldn't, he says all this stuff about Lymond, like, I wouldn't speak to fellow human beings as you do or deal out unmoved such violent punishments. And I made no secret of it, so that if you suspect me, it is not without cause only. And then Lymond says, you've had a change of heart. And he's like, it's easy to mock, but you cared for that eagle and yet you killed it. So it's like, it's not completely explicit, but I do think he's pretty clear.
So then Lymond emerges from this scene paralyzingly bright and sharp as an icicle. So we're back to the frozen imagery. And with a sigh and a flip of her sock hat, Philippa set herself to restore him.
Yay!
So let's dive in. There's so many good, wonderful lines. I just want to like all of them, but like please jump in. I'll just start 525 when Ludo mentions that the people at the revels know Philippa, and Lymond says she's the model for their dragons.
Yeah. And she's excellent at managing Turks.
Yeah. And if we remember, she did organize the mask earlier. That's why everyone knows her, that had like the Turks doing something.
Yeah.
And not only did she organize it and it was an awesome mask, but she did it very affordably.
Yeah. She was very cheap about it. In a good way, not cheap in a bad way. And then they have this, like, they start to have this play with words, like right here at the beginning, where they're talking about like the whifflers and the to make people buffle, and like hufflers, you know. So you just start to have this like little bit of assonance and consonants and just playing with these rhymes, and yeah.
And you know, you can just imagine how Philippa picked this up at home with Kate and Gideon and them entertaining each other and improvising together. And I'm sure Lymond with Sibylla, despite his traumatic childhood, had a similar thing. It's just like the way that the two of them, it's like they grew up apart, but it's like they're just so made for each other. Like all this prep has turned out to be for their wits to sparkle.
Hello, kitty.
What is a drake's neck supposed to be?
Isn't that a dragon? Isn't it
a drake isn't a form of a dragon, but like I can't figure out in this specific part, because she's picking up drake's necks and I don't know what that means.
Is that a drake? A male duck?
Yeah, I think it's a duck. So it's like maybe it's not a fur, but like duck.
Feather.
Like a scarf. I was imagining scarves for some reason in my head.
I think a male duck is a drake.
Yeah. I'm sure a commenter will tell us. It's something made out of the feathers of the drake.
Yeah, when I first read that, I was like, she has something made out of dragons? Because I was thinking the same thing. Like a drake is a kind of dragon. And I was like, wait. I know we're doing magic and astrology, but have we gone all the way to dragons?
Well, it's the Master Betcher, the milliner, and a milliner is a hat maker, right?
Oh, so maybe they're hats. Yeah. And yeah, because he does say, what will Mr. Betcher's ducks do? So the drakes are ducks, yeah.
Okay.
There is a long tradition of putting birds on hats, so.
There we go. I also love how this guy, Master Holt, is just kind of anxiously following them around going, gentlemen, gentlemen, as they get increasingly rambunctious. And it's like, this is like, you know, the famous Sir Henry Sidney and Lymond the Voivoda of Russia, and they're just playing and being rambunctious and making a mess. So they start going through the props, which also is hilarious. And you can just sort of imagine the backstories of all these things and what they would have been used for. And I feel like some of this is probably from real historical records. So some of the props, they talk about who they remind them of. So first of all, we have antique head trimmed about with changeable and red sarcenet. Who does that remind you of? Thoughts? Who is that?
Where are you?
527. Antique head. I thought that one was...
Antique head turned about changeable and red sarcenet. Okay.
Has somebody been beheaded?
I took that one as the Dame de Dutance because it's antique and it's trimmed.
Oh. And she's always described as wearing like sort of this awful yellow wig. So, I mean, it's red sarcenet, but it could be sort of like a changeable thing. So,
well, and always like old-fashioned fashion.
Mm-hmm.
And then ox legs for satyrs. Who does that remind you of?
I mean, that's a man with a goat. Like he's a man on the top and a goat on the bottom. So.
I think that is her driving at Lymond. His reputation. And then we have, I'm sure I'm saying this wrong, medioxes stuffed with hay, half death, half man. Now I do know who that reminds me of, said Lymond feelingly.
Una.
I wasn't.
That sounds horrible.
It does, but he says it feelingly, and that's basically how he saw her, dead and stuffed with hay.
I always wonder about that one because it's so morbid in this happy scene, but it is true that he saw her stuff with hay. The other thing is the half death, half man. Maybe that's Lymond himself.
Yeah, I mean, Philippa doesn't know about the Una thing, right? They didn't tell. I don't remember.
Marta told her.
I don't think
Marta knew about it. Only Jared and Lymond, and I can't imagine them talking about it.
Yeah, I can't imagine that those. Yeah, but he says it feelingly, so it doesn't mean that she knows what.
Yeah.
That's the only one that I understood right away. Like, that's the only one that I had an immediate picture of, like, oh no.
It's so weird because I love how these morbid threads kind of run through this amazing funny scene. I think that's part of what makes it so powerful. So then we have she grabs an axe and lets it fall on the next person who passes, which is Lymond, and he drops to his knees laughing, and she says, "I have never in the whole of my life seen you laugh before." And he looks up still gasping and says, "Now that is ridiculous."
Is that true? Has she not witnessed him laugh before? I don't think that's true.
That is not true. He actually laughed in the previous scene with the two of them in like the last chapters we read.
That's what I thought.
I mean, he's been visiting her mother and father for years when she was a kid. Like, I'm sure they made him laugh.
But I actually do think the spirit of it is true. She's never seen this side of him before. She's always seen him as this, initially this horrible person, and then as this very distant adult who's so much more mature and like removed from her. And I think this is the first breakthrough moment where she sees him as like this silly tatty boy, Lymond in Game of Kings, like this childlike fun side of him that like we fell in love with so long ago, but she had no idea that was there.
Yeah.
I loved this image of Nicholas grabbing a sword and a shield, and Lymond into Harcourt, who are like the best swordsmen. Like, it talks about like they're numbered among the best swordsmen in the continent, and they're just like these little wooden play swords, like going up and down the aisles. And I just kind of had the image in my mind of Errol Flynn and Basil Rathbone in The Adventures of Robin Hood, and they have this amazing sword fight, and I just imagined, like, that's obviously a serious scene in the movie, but the Lymond and Nicholas and de Harcourt just doing that kind of swashbuckling, through this. And then the guy running around behind him like, be careful. The stands are unstable.
Yes. And then
foreshadowing.
Oh, no, it's so funny. Just the way that guy keeps popping in and okay, so Philippa, she is now clad in her drake's necks. Then we have Lymond climbing up in a balcony, gesticulating and reciting. So basically they found all the manuscripts for all the plays, and it's actually de Harcourt who discovers this Love and Life by William Baldwin, a comedy concerning the way to life. So if I haven't read many plays from the 1500s, but I did go see Everyman, was it? And so it's like that whole genre where the plays are like very didactic and every character like represents something.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so each character, lust, luck, and love, lust, promise, and lechery, etc. I think not only is it super hilarious, but there's all kinds of meanings you can read into it about like what these characters represent and who and how they tie into the story and all that stuff. But also just one of my favorite moments, Lymond says, "I don't believe it," and Philippa says, "Be quiet, go on, Ludo." The way that she keeps telling Lymond what to do, and it just works.
Yep. It's so I love like de Harcourt painfully. All the characters' names begin with L. So good.
Yeah.
Leonard Lustigatz,
Yeah.
Lame Lazar, Lidger Damon,
That's
Little
funny.
Looked For, Who Is Death. So clever.
Yes. But the play is missing.
I also like Lace Lechery, the sumptuous whore.
And that's how Philippa starts. I'm lechery, a luscious whore. And just I love the way Dunnett writes it too, because she totally captures the energy and like the cadence of how they speak and how they keep interrupting each other, but it's that kind of like positive interruptions when you're building on each other. So Lymond's like, wait, and then like goes and pulls on a costume and then like puts on everybody's, finds costumes for people. And so he and Philippa are just like creating this scene together by like improvising off of each other.
Yeah, and just like you can just see him like throwing costumes at Harcourt and Nicholas, and like here's a cape, and here, yeah.
And so Philippa is lechery, a luscious whore, and Lymond is Lamuel the lewd. And yeah, so then we have the sort of explanation: long Sunday evenings of nonsensical charades with Kate and Gideon paraded before her, and evenings spent devising songs and poems in doggerel, with elves or without. This is just the whole like, first of all, how great is that? I spent my Sundays like watching The Simpsons, and I can't improv anything. And I love that like they didn't have all these external sources of entertainment, so they had to learn how to do it themselves, and that's awesome. And then just the way that she and Lymond just keep trading off each other. And he critically is like, that's very good. Not enough L's in the last line.
She's like, well, you do better. So then he does. And and then Henry Sidney coming from like a couple aisles over or something. He's like, what is going
on? And the yeoman just going, gentlemen, every so often. And then to Harcourt, I can't. Clutching his gold gown about him, and he's too nervous and he can't think of words, and so Lymond gives him lines.
Yeah.
And then Philippa starts doing more, and Lymond's calling bravo, oh bravo, after her lines.
And I love that he does one of the verses, and Philippa's like, "You changed the meter."
I reserve the right to change the meter.
Don't interrupt.
He just completely loses all these walls, and he just like is himself again, and it's so refreshing and wonderful.
And then there's another side of her like telling him what to do. She's like, let me do it. Yes. That's free. I don't care, let me do it. You got all the last verse. All right. Just yeah, it's good.
I also admit my embarrassment that it took me like several reads to realize that Languish Locked in L is a like play on the English accent not pronouncing the H in hell, so they're not only locked in the letter L, but they're locked in hell.
Yeah.
The shrew loose ladies of the night are languish locked in L.
There was a roar of applause, and even the yeoman, who keeps telling them, gentlemen.
I guess I love that he's cheering too. Even he finally gets into the play.
Yeah.
And that's when things go terribly wrong.
Oh yeah, so sad. I love that Lymond though. Henry Sidney's like, Philippa, and Lymon's like, oh, she's all right. She just knocked herself out.
And Lymond is actually so sweet here when he's like, oh, I let me help to Harcourt, let me pay for the damage, and he's just so still like all these walls are down, and he's acting like this caring person.
Yeah. Poor to Harcourt though.
Yeah, and then we have that little reminder because he's like, he's trying to pay for things, and Sidney promises, don't worry, like I'll get you the bill, but like it's okay to go and take care of Philippa. And Sidney says, the men who fight under you are fortunate. And then Lymond says, but life is not quite like this in Russia.
Yeah.
This whole scene, besides how great it is, it just reminds you of what Lymond used to be. Like I was thinking about I forget the name of the tavern, but the tavern that they went to in the very first book with like the wrestling matches.
Yep, the ostrich.
And then also in the second book, when he like goes to the salon, Michel Harrison's salon, and like they do all of this weird stuff with paper mache. It's been so long since I read that part, but I was like, it's been so long since we've seen him perform like this in this way and have so much fun doing it.
Well, and I feel like it asks this big question of like, so why are you spending your life trying to be a mercenary fighter when you like that's not who you should be?
Mm.
Yeah. And I think the fun thing here too is that have we ever really seen him perform in this way with someone else? Like,
I don't think he's ever had a match, right? The closest again was Christian because they had such banter and they could match each other's wit. But like in the scene in the ostrich with the bagpiper, Lymond led that whole thing on his own. And the scene with Michelle Harrison's, like, again, he led the whole thing on his own. So yeah, I don't think we've seen him. He's always had like minions, you know, lots of people participating and playing along, but he hasn't had a partner leading it.
Like a back and forth with someone.
Yeah. And even Chancellor, like theirs was a very intellectual relationship of equals. It wasn't the joyous part and the creative part the same way.
Yeah. And then we get 533.
Lymond settled with Philippa's head on his arm and was disposed to smile sometimes too. And then we have this part where he kind of goes through and thinks about her. Dee, do you want to talk about this?
I mean, I just felt like this page, what I wrote off in the margin was just Lymond sees Philippa. And I think that that's really what happens on this page, is that he just begins to think about who she is. And he starts out thinking about like, where did she get parts of her personality? So what did she get from Kate? What did she get from Gideon? But he's really just thinking through his contact with her over the years and his relationship with her over the years and seeing her in a new light and like shedding a different, like looking at her through a different lens, and the lens of an adult woman who is his match, and what is she like, and then figuring out like, oh, she's nearly 20, you know, and just like that is this bit of information that kind of causes his brain to flip about her, you know, just that this light turns on.
I love the line, but of course the mind which had comprehended and discussed with him all the intricacies of the present blunderings of nations could not be a child's. Yeah. Like, he's known for a while that she's meeting him on an adult level, but it's just clicked.
Yeah. And then just that same paragraph, the loving spirit which could serve Queen Mary, seeing clearly all her weakness, had nothing immature about it, or the wit which Ascham had found worthy to teach. And so just that idea that it's not that Philippa is, you know, pretty, which she is, you know, or beautiful. It's that she's smart, and that she is loving and kind, and that she is witty and quick. And those are the things about her that he becomes slightly entranced with, you know, like he becomes a little enchanted, I think, with her. Yeah. And it's who she really is, which is cool.
And like quick wit and honesty, all these things that he values that I think tell us that this like the awful person he's trying to be is not what he values either. All the things he values in Philippa are all of these wonderful, good qualities. It's not, she's, you know, it's just not anything you think the stereotype of the Vovoda Bolshoya would value. And it's not Guzel at all, you know, the ambition and power hungriness and lack of empathy. It's the reverse.
Yeah.
Philippe, you were going to say something a minute ago, weren't you?
I was.
I thought you were. I'm sorry.
If I was, I forget. I was just gonna, you know, if Dee hadn't mentioned it, but she did just mention that like he's not confused about her age anymore, and like that's the thing that sort of flips the switch. But that's pretty much exactly what Dee said. It's like when he realizes she's nearly 20, he's this whole time he keeps forgetting how old she is. He keeps purposely, I feel, putting off the fact that she is this like grown, mature woman, because in his mind, she was always that 10-year-old child that hated him because he had the awful nerve to come into her house and speak to her parents that way. And like, that's how he saw her for so long.
I mean, if he keeps her too young, then she's safe for him, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if he thinks of her as too young, then she is not a danger to his heart, to his concept of himself, to this life that he thinks that he wants, you know, which he doesn't want, but he thinks he wants it, you know. But as soon as she becomes not too young, as soon as she becomes nearly 20, then she is now a danger to what he thinks he wants.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily just the fact that she's 20. I think whatever age she was, it's
right.
You know.
The light that gets flipped
Mm-hmm.
on. The fact that he can't, like, I think he could push away any inkling of attraction to her just by like, nope, you know, just like, nope, she's too young, you know, just kind of push it away mentally and not even deal with it. And he's been doing that for so long that it's like habit, I think. And it's like, oh wait, she's not too young.
I don't know if I've ever had this happen to me in real life, like when I was awake like this, but I've had it happen in dreams where I have a dream that makes me realize something, come to a conclusion, and it's like a fully formed conclusion that I realized after the dream like had been percolating in my subconscious for a while, but I hadn't been consciously aware of it until the dream made it come to my attention. And I feel like that's what happens to him here, but he's awake, is like, this is all these threads have been percolating for a while. And I'm sure that part of him that doesn't want to deal with it, that doesn't think it's right, that, you know, whatever, has been kind of intentionally not letting it come into his conscious mind. And yeah, the age is like part of the reason. Like if he just thinks of her as a child, then it can't manifest. And it's like, as all these threads come together, as he realizes this is definitely an adult woman, suddenly he can't stop it, and it's like the wall comes down.
It's like a wave crashes over him, you know, and it's just it's cool. Also, this paragraph about Kate I thought was really a little melancholy, but also kind of beautiful, where he says, unlike Kate, this girl had broken from her setting. All that Kate was, she now had, and standing on Kate's shoulders, something more, still growing, blossoming, and yet to fruit.
So it's really sad for Kate, because Kate is awesome too.
Yeah. So it's a little melancholy, but also just that he sees that she has these qualities of her mother, but she also has more, and that she's not, like, I like that his concept of her is also about her potential. Like it's not about freezing her in this moment where she's wonderful and delightful and he wants to keep her this way forever. It's also about, which I think happens a lot with people, you know, but it's also about she has this potential to be more, and she hasn't yet
Yeah. I also really love the references to Gideon, because, you know, Gideon was one of the first people that just kind of instinctively and intuitively understood Lymond, and he went through this like huge transformation from hating him to being like, oh, let me take care of you and help you, and helped him without really understanding why and knowing all the details. He just instinctively figured out that Lymond was good, and really went out of his way. And they initially, it was their relationship even more than the one with Kate, that was kind of like the meaningful one with the Somervilles. And then poor Gideon goes and dies off screen, and we don't hear about him for so long. And then here we have all these references to Gideon again, and I really appreciate that. And that Lymond also remembers him so well and thinks so highly of him.
Yeah, I was so sad when he was gone. It was just...
Yeah, we only get that one book with him.
But it, you know, a little bit of him, but it made a big impression.
Yeah.
Okay, so then we have this moment, and deep within him.
This moment is so good, where it says, he's looking at her, and then he says, and deep within him, missing its accustomed tread, his heart paused and gave one single stroke as if on an anvil. "We're there, sir," Nicholas said. The air hurt his skin, his nerves unsheathed left him oversensitized and defenseless, as sometimes happened, exposed raw to the touch of his clothes, as if his flesh had been stripped off with acid. He remained perfectly still. So that line about his heart gives a single stroke as if on an anvil is so dramatic.
And he is, I mean, this is also, like, this is a complete falling in love. This is also sexual. Like, he's looking at her face and seeing how beautiful she is. Yeah. But also all those lines about his nerves being exposed, to me, is like, he's the ring castle of the book, and he's had all these walls up for so long, and now, like, all the walls are down so far that, like, even his clothes hurt his skin.
Yeah, and just that he's exposed. And I also think it's a paragraph of just extreme vulnerability, that he is so exposed and so raw and just kind of scraped raw. And I don't know, like, I think when you have this emotional epiphany like that, you're just vulnerable, and it is like, you know, your skin is sensitive and your nerves are raw, you know, and just things are, you feel the air and all of that embodiment of this epiphany that he has is really cool.
And then right after that, he's Francis Crawford again. So this is all, again, everything's stripped down. He's the real Lymond.
Yeah. And then he's kind of walking around in a daze for like hours and hours and hours.
I love it so much. I love how he's like in his room staring at the wall for 2 hours.
Yeah. His hands are shaking. Like,
yeah. He felt like a dog, he thought, whose master had died, when he realizes he's expected to leave instead of just like waiting for Philippa.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love to Harcourt's like, "Are you okay?"
Yeah. I'm the one that broke my arm, but are you okay?
Are you hurt? He's just like, it's delayed shock, I suppose.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive to Harcourt even can figure out some things out.
Oh man. And Harcourt's like, "You need to go to bed." Just,
But then he goes down and plays music, and I love the descriptions of how the characters react, because again, it just tells us their personality so well. De Harcourt doesn't wake up. Danny isn't musical and just stuffs his ears, but Adam lay for a long time listening, his eyes wide in the dark. Adam can sense, oh, this is not his normal robot music. Something's up.
Yeah, and just that Lymond had never allowed Adam, like, listening to the music, which without opium and without alcohol, Lymond had never allowed within his hearing before. So Adam's never heard a sober Lymond play like this. Yeah. This was interesting. So, because I think we're in Adam's perspective in the next paragraph, aren't we? Where he says, so, but Adam lay for a long time listening, his eyes wide in the dark, to music which without opium, without alcohol, Lymond had never allowed within his hearing before. He could not guess at the echoes which lay under the music. This is Adam who can't guess, right?
Yes.
Okay, so he could not guess at the echoes which lay under the music. Man has an animal appetite, or I would be nothing. I too have had my Margaret Lennox, my Aga Marat, and my child Jolita, Reed Mallet. More of each, and for longer, it has destroyed neither of us, and now nothing can hinder us. Is that still Adam?
No.
So Adam couldn't have known that those were the thoughts that Lymond was going through, because that's what Guzelle said to Lymond.
Yeah, like Adam can't know that stuff. So,
he doesn't.
Yeah.
He's shifting the point of view. She does it. Normally not recommended, but she does it well. So Adam can't guess, but then she tells us what is going on underneath.
Yeah.
This is also, just this whole section is all mostly Lymond's perspective, which is just so rare in these books. So to see it coming from him is also what makes this part so amazing. So.
Yeah. 100%. And it's just the way, like, because we've been looking at him from the outside for this whole book. Like, he's almost like not the main character of the book because he's so far removed from us for so long, and then suddenly we're thrust into like one of the longest, if not the longest, point of view scenes of this transformative, most meaningful moment maybe of his life. But why does he think about that line from Guzelle in that moment? What is this telling us?
I mean, well, I mean, I think the end of that line is key, right? That she lists these terrible, terrible things in his life. And then he says, it has destroyed neither of us, and now nothing can hinder us. So perhaps it's, as he's playing this music, the truth of those last two sentences are like he's realizing the truth that this is, that he's not destroyed, that he hasn't been. So even though Guzelle said that, there is a truth to that he went through these horrible, horrible things. He wasn't destroyed. I'm not sure if he believed that before.
Wow.
Maybe.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just saying, maybe he doesn't believe it now, but maybe he's starting to.
Well, so I was gonna say, I think there's a couple of hints in the subsequent sentences that close out the chapter about what's going on with him. We have so he watches the sunrise clean and virginal and bright, and then he thinks soon men would be around him and he must stop thinking, for there was nothing to think about, and allow the event, which was not an event, to sink forgotten into the recesses. He remembers the woman he bedded in Barrack, and how when he could bear it no longer, she left him alone. And he thinks, too late, too late, too late, it had happened.
And I wrote, not too late.
No, but he's still planning on going back to Russia in 3 weeks' time or 2 weeks' time.
That's right.
There's no way that anything can happen with Philippa. He's not going to take her with him. So he's got to forget that this is a thing. So he's already pushing it down. He's already building those fortress walls back up around him.
I don't like that.
I don't like it either, but it's what's happening.
That is what he's doing. That's absolutely what he's doing.
Yeah.
I reject that because I don't think that's actually what, I still do not think he's going to go back to Russia. I think something's going to happen. And I think Philippe is going to do something. Like, I think she absolutely knows what he's planning on. And I think she is going to foil his plan in some way. Like, there's no way. He's not going back to Russia. So, but well, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right that he's thinking about, he's had this moment, he's had this epiphany, but now it's like, no, it can't happen.
Up until this point, I don't think Dunnett has given us a viable reason for Lymond to try and stay behind. And he's still planning on going back to Russia, but this is the first thing that I could really see him making him change his mind. Because now that he cares even more about Philippa, if Margaret Lennox really gets her claws sunk in and tries to, do her and Kate harm, I don't think he's going to be so coy about it and end up leaving for Russia again. So
I can see him making some sort of like self-sacrificial, like, she's better off without me or something, like he's got such a hang up about people sacrificing themselves for him, which they do. So it's not like he's wrong about that necessarily, but
I think we can all see that coming. So
he's gonna do some sort of like, I'm being with me will just be tragedy or something.
Well, I think it's important that he's thinking here about these experiences of sexual like degradation and corruption. I mean, this idea of man has an animal appetite. He's thinking about this abuse by Margaret Lennox and the Agamorat, and then this awful situation with Jolita and with this prostitute that he just slept with, like, and then he's thinking too late. I think like probably part of this is like if I was 16 or 20 or whatever and this was my first love, this would be perfect. But now how could I inflict on Philippa, someone who's had all these awful like traumatic experiences and also like taken advantage of people, you know? And again, it's all very arguable how much he was taking advantage of people versus being taken advantage of, but definitely not good, you know, sexual experiences.
He certainly sees himself as corrupted, I think, sexually, and that he has been bought and sold, and he's sold himself, and you know, and deliberately used sex as a exchange more than once, and like he sees that as deeply impure, and he sees Philippa as pure and like this virginal sunrise kind of thing. So yeah, but it's not true. He's
it's not true. And so much of what he, you know, like just I always think about Jarrett, like how could you sleep with the Agamorat? How could you use his love for you? And it's like, dude, the guy like basically raped him, like coerced him, was like, I'll kill your friends if you don't sleep with me. Like, you know, like all these things that Lymond thinks is his own corrupt behavior is like, no, that's not your fault. That's something bad that happened to you. But yeah, I think the too late here is the ominous bit that we end on, which is totally annoying. I agree, because you just want the happiness to last forever because finally sunlight.
Finally something good. Yeah, but I can't like. No, it has to be. This has to go through. Oh my gosh. If this is another toddler situation, I would be so mad. Like,
I don't know. We're only on the 5th book. We still need like lots of tension and drama and angst for us to get through. You know, can't all be sunshine and roses from here on out.
Yeah, they're not immediately going to start dating and be like all happy about it. So there's got to be some problems to make it all the sweeter when they end up sailing off into the sunset together.
Right, but if
on a ship that you called in book 1.
You did.
I'm so proud of myself. But if this ends, because you know the last in Pawn and Frankincense, I was just like, as long as we have 2 alive toddlers at the end, I'll be fine. Like that's all I said through the whole book. And if this ends up, if all I've said through 6 books is Lymond and Philippa have to get together, and if they're not together at the end of book 6, oh, I'm so mad. But
I don't think you'll ever forgive me, but
I will not. No, that's not true. I will totally forgive you because you're my friend. But yeah.
So tell me your hopes and dreams for, I guess, the rest of this book and anything you're wanting, and you know, I mean, obviously aside from Lymond and Philippa riding off into the sunset, what do you think's going to happen? What do you hope for?
Well, there's got to be some reason that Lymond stays behind or goes somewhere else and not back to Russia. And that I don't quite know what it is yet. So, but I think that's going to work itself out in the next, what do we have, 5 more chapters? Yeah.
I really want this whole Courtney, is that the guy that died? The letters, whatever the letter guy. I want that whole situation to get resolved. You know, the treason, possible espionage business. Hopefully the book does not end with Philippa and Kate like imprisoned in the White Tower, which I just have this image of that happening.
I want some clarity on the Danny Hislop / Ludovic de Harcourt thing.
Yeah.
Who can be trusted, who can't be trusted, and what are both of their motivations in following Lymond around and possibly trying to kill him or spy on him or whatever it is.
Yeah, I definitely want to know what de Harcourt's motivation was. Like what was going on with him. That's a question for sure. I think I don't want answers about Sibylla and France and Lymond's parentage, because I don't think there's enough room to really go into that in this book. Like, I would like that to be an interesting, meaty plot, and I feel like there's too much to wrap up in this book to also have that. So I'm hoping that's more sixth book stuff.
We might get a morsel or some half-truth about something, but that is a question for the final book to solve for sure.
I'd like to see more of Philippa just holding around with Lymond. I'm guessing we probably won't have any more like fun scenes, but more banter would be nice. I'd really like to see Margaret Lennox get her just desserts, but I just don't think it's going to happen because doesn't she like die of old age? I'm like,
oh, don't tell me that. I don't
know. I'm just saying, like, I just feel like she's a real person, so I highly doubt that she's gonna have, like, she's not gonna get her just desserts because that's not how power works in the real world. Like, she probably nothing bad happened to her. She probably like died at 85 in her sleep or whatever.
Well, since reading these books, I've realized that Darnley is the one that marries Mary Queen of Scots. I do remember in the several movies that I've seen about that same thing that Darnley's mother is still around. So I know that Margaret Lennox lives for a couple more years, but I also don't know how long this book series goes. So
I do think I think you can, I don't think it's too spoilery because you know from history, she's doing all this stuff to try to maneuver her son into being the King of Scotland. But we know we know he's going to get murdered. So it's going to suck for her that her son gets murdered.
But isn't his daughter one of the future queens?
His son is the future king.
His son is the future king. Okay.
First, right?
James, yeah.
James the first. So her grandson does.
It's her grandson who's the James in James Sailed Across the Sea to Marry Anne.
Yeah.
James.
Yep. King James.
Depending on how long she lives.
He's the one that was super into like heresy and witchcraft and like trying to root out the witches too.
Yeah, Macbeth was written partly to appeal to his obsession with witches, and he wrote like books about witch hunting and shit. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess the hope for Margaret Lennox is she dies somewhere in between her son being murdered and her grandson becoming king, like somewhere in there. But who knows?
I'd be super interested in reading like a biography about her once this series is over. So
there is definitely at least one. I think I was looking at. I haven't read it yet. You guys want to see some fan art?
Yeah.
I'm sure there's much more out there in the universe, but this was what I could find on short notice on the internet. I really wanted to get access to like zines and stuff, but they're not mailing anything from England to the US. But anyway, Bella Rolls has a bunch. Here's I love her caption. It's the anvil scene on this one.
The anvil scene.
And then she's got this beautiful color version.
Oh.
With a little quote, yeah. And then there's one from Languish Locked in L, which is also just gorgeous. And
where's
then,
her little sock hat?
Oh yeah,
maybe she took it off when she was putting on stuff for the show.
Oh yeah, because she had the wig on, right? So it probably came off. Yeah. There we go. It's big. Isn't it so nice? And then here's one with the quote on it and Philippa. And then I think we all know by now that Philippa is the love interest and female lead. So there's some great art of Philippa through the years, also from Bella Rolls. So here's the young Philippa, and then Philippa going to look after the baby, and then here she is as an adult. And here she is in 2 dresses. And here's just more beautiful drawings of her. So
fun hats.
Yeah, these are lots from Bella Rolls. So anyway, it makes me really happy to see these, and I don't know if people have links to other art that's on the internet, please put it in our comments so we can look at it.
I'm sure this is one of those chapters that you've been giddily awaiting for us to arrive at.
Yeah, no, because like Dee was like this close to giving up, and I was like, you have to get to this chapter. Like, this makes the whole book worthwhile.
It's true. It's true. This was such, I think, the contrast between everything that's come to now over the last, well, really the last, from the middle of Disorderly Nights to here has just been bleak. bleak. And this is, yeah, it just made this chapter so delightful to read.
Well, and just the way that we go back to this version of Lymond who is playful and fun and funny, and like it is kind of right in the middle of Disorderly Nights where that just goes away. He stops being that person. He like turns that part of himself off. And there's that moment where he kind of acknowledges it and talks about it. He's talking with Jarrett and Adam. They're riding on their horses, and he has this speech about, you know, I want conversation and women to talk to, not to rape, and music, and every day without music, you know, and just this idea that he knows that he's turned off that side of himself, and he misses that part of himself so much, and he's longing for it. And then we go so long with this desert of him like not being that person anymore. And yeah, it is like you almost forget it. Like I always love going back and reading the first two books because it's like, oh, that, like, look at how he was so much fun. So I love that Dunnett doesn't forget that, and she wants to bring that back. She certainly makes us wait. It's kitty.
Yeah. The true star of the show.
Yeah. She's gotta be the center of attention. Any final thoughts you guys want to share before we wrap up?
It was good.
All right. Well, thank you for everyone who is watching and commenting. We appreciate your comments and your encouragement to keep going.
Thank you for encouraging me to keep going.
It helps.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah.